All right, hey folks, so today's topic is why dieters fail. So notice the wording used there, it's why dieters fail rather than why diets fail. This is more to do with the individual and their application of the diet rather than the diet model itself. So carry on listening and see what you can learn from and benefit your own cuts in the future. But firstly, thanks for making it onto my channel. If you have any questions or comments, pop them down below. And if you'd like to work with me on your own strength and physique goals, there's a link in the description. So what I wanted to discuss today was the attitudes that people have when they're on their diet. So there are a wide range of ways to lose weight. We all know that the calorie deficit is what we need, but the application of that can vary. But there's also a tremendous amount of variability in terms of people who actually succeed with their diets and continue to keep the weight off relative to people who don't. And a large part of that is to do with their attitudes towards the diet and towards the process of losing fat. This conversation was sparked on by a chat I had with a new client yesterday, and he was talking about his views on certain foods. He had very black and white views on foods in which he was taught by other people in the past. So he was taught things like, you've heard brown rice is good, white rice is bad, sweet potatoes are great, regular potatoes aren't. He mentioned in conversation, I eat sweet potatoes. I only eat sweet potatoes, Faz. It's like, okay. Why? I had to explore. Why was this man so passionate about potatoes? What was the idea? And so we explored the conversation and we explored that line of talk, and it came out that he had very rigid views on what would allow him to succeed in the diet. And then his background was also that he had gone up in weight, down in weight, up in weight, down in weight over the years. And every diet he'd been on, he'd pretty much failed, and he was back to square one, which he'd been doing for possibly close to 2 decades. And as I talked to him more and more, I realized more and more what his issue was very rigid approach to dieting, very rigid approach to his attitudes towards food, almost a sort of a moralistic and almost religious view of certain foods rather than certain others, like some are good, some are evil. And I wanted to talk about that because I think potentially that still afflicts a lot of people and it's holding them back. It's one of the things that's holding them back from actually succeeding in the diet. So a large part of that conversation was easing his mind about some of these things. So let's start with some of these notes I've got here. So one of the big reasons why dieters fail is that they expect perfection. Now, part of what I was talking about with this client last night was the idea of rigid versus flexible attitudes towards the diet. So if you're the kind of person who has a lot of food rules, so it's like a lot of very finicky food rules, like, okay, I'm going to have white rice rather than brown rice, or brown rice rather than white rice. I'm not going to eat after 6 p.m. I'm not going to eat in the morning. I'm not going to have any carbs. I'm going to have very rigid rules around dieting. I'm going to have good foods. I'm going to have bad foods. I'm going to have on plan, and then I'm going to have blowouts. That is what they refer to in the literature as rigid attitude towards dieting. It's this idea that the diet, when you're on it, has to be a certain way. It has to be perfection, down to the point where even the color of the rice matters. Yeah, even down to the point where it's like, okay, vegetables, what kind of veg? Should I eat broccoli or should I eat cauliflower? Which is better? This sort of perfectionist view of dieting and dieting foods. Now, in terms of flexibility, what flexibility isn't, the way it should not be applied, is thinking brown rice versus white rice. That is not flexibility. Okay, that is not picking the right types of foods. That is insanity, basically. What it is, the way to implement flexibility is, 1, to not expect perfection, and 2, to allow imperfections. Now they're two very separate things. They're related, but they're separate things. So don't expect you to be perfect. Don't expect yourself to be perfect. So, and if you do go off plan, that's fine. But the point is, if you go off plan, we all know the guy, and this is the guy I was speaking to last night. We all know the guy that if he goes off plan for one meal, that's it. The rest of his day is blown. Yeah. We also know people who go off plan for one day and the rest of their week is blown. We know some people that go off diet for one day and that's it. They're done for the next 3 months. That is because they expect perfection. They have this really high view of what a diet is, very high, essentially wrong, misguided view of what a diet should be. And they have all these rules which are impossible to break. It's kind of like being in a classroom with an overly domineering teacher who won't allow you to do anything. Like, you've got to write in the lines. And if you don't write in the lines, the teacher's going to shout at you. So what happens? Well, this is the analogy, right? What happens? Does the child give you perfection every time? No. what happens is they're so bloody scared the moment they go out the lines, because they will do, because they're shaking, they're in their writing, teacher shouts at them and they hate the class and never want to go back in again. And a lot of people with this rigid view of dieting, that's how they treat themselves. They are simultaneously the teacher and they are simultaneously the child, because every time they go off their overly rigid rules, they just scream at themselves internally, and then you don't see them again for another 3 months. And the cycle goes round year after year after year, and sadly, decade after decade, until at some point they wake up and they realize, you know what, I need to fix this. So I'm going to go higher fast, because that's what he specializes in. So in terms of how to be more flexible, so the take-home point for you guys is, one, the calorie deficit is all that matters. Okay, don't be overly passionate about any particular type of food or any way of structuring things. One thing I say all the time, and is more and more true the more I work with people, is one person's normal will look very different to another person's normal. But as long as it makes you happy and it's healthy, then go for it. Okay. Now, also, it means if you do have imperfections, and you can go off the diet and just get back on it the next meal. You don't need to go off the diet and that's it, it's all over. If you mess up, and you probably will, it's fine. Just get back on track the next meal. Be an adult about it. Okay, you've made a mistake, fine. Fess up and get back on track next weekend. No one's judging. No, next meal. No one's judging you with that. But that's the thing what a lot of people don't get. They think they have this sort of, they think they're the inner child getting told off by the head teacher. That's not the case. You're out of school now. You're a grown-up. You're an adult. Okay, you earn your own money. So if something goes wrong with the diet, allow yourself to get back on track the very next meal. And alongside that, what I'd say is, don't expect yourself to be perfect. Okay, you don't have to search for perfection. You just have to search for progress. As long as you're moving in the right direction, you're going well. Now, second thing is this. Second thing is not considering life after the diet. One of the biggest truisms that I've found for the majority of people is that near the end of the diet, your eating patterns and habits should start to resemble life after the diet is over. Now, you think about what most people do. By the end of the diet, most people are white knuckling it. What I refer to as white knuckling it means they're holding on for dear life. It's stricter than ever. By the end of the diet, people are as strict as they've ever been. Actually, towards the end of the diet, you need to be more relaxed. Your diet needs to resemble more like what it's going to look like after the diet is over, if you are thinking about the long term. Now, I did a piece on that on my Instagram a while ago. I'll show you on the next slide, but it's called the helicopter analogy of fat loss. That is, the more you have to lose, the quicker you can go down. But when you get to the close to the landing stage, when you're close to being the shape you want to be in, you have to really slow it down. So near the end of the diet, your diet and your foods you eat and the style of eating you should start to resemble life after the diet is over. People seem to have this misconception that they're going to diet, and they're going to diet, like crash diet into a weight. Let's say, I don't know, let's say you've come from 100 kilos down to 80 kilos, 220 pounds down to 180 pounds. They're going to crash into that 180 pounds, and magically they're going to just know how to eat and maintain 80. You're not, dude. Like, you need to start practicing that before you hit your target, because hitting your target will be all like hell for leather enthusiasm. You need to understand how to eat. Like, how are you going to navigate a night out? How are you going to navigate a dinner out? How are you going to navigate, say you go off plan, you have some Maltesers? You have no idea, because you've just crashed into that finishing line. So you've got no idea. There's no surprise that you've gone back up in weight and ballooned back up to 100 kilos. And it's happened for past 2 decades. It's no surprise. Near the end of the diet, you have to start to begin to you have to be patient, and your diet has to begin to resemble what it's going to look like afterward. Now, there are 2 exceptions to that. One, and I've written about this before many times, but the whole dieting harder and very low calorie diets. The exception to that is, one, if you're pre-contest. Pre-contest, if you're a competing bodybuilder, all bets are off. You need to do what you need to do to get in shape for the day. What happens afterwards? Ideally, you should set it up so you don't, rebound, of course, in an ideal scenario. But if you're late, if you're behind, and you need to get ready on the day, there are ways and means of doing that. The second thing is, you would go more extreme at the start of that if you have more to lose. If you're talking to a guy who's got 100 pounds to lose, which is a realistic scenario, right? And you tell him, look, we're going to go nice and slow. We're going to take it like half a pound a week. or £1 a week, that's 2 years before he hits his goal. If you say to that guy who's got £100 to lose, we're going to go at it hell for leather until we're £50 away and then we're going to slow it down, great. We're going to lose, £20 the first month, £20 the next month, and then boom, we're going to slow it down. Okay, that's an exception. And so, as I mentioned, this is the helicopter analogy of fat loss. I'll just make it a bit bigger. The analogy is this: at the beginning of the diet, when you have more body fat to lose, you can go down faster. Now, at a certain point, and that point will be different for everyone. For some people, it's 20% fat. For some people, it's 30% body fat. Okay. For some people, it's like 12% body fat. At a certain point, they'll encounter turbulence. So, analogy again, right? Clever, isn't it? At a certain point, you'll encounter turbulence. At that stage, that's when it's your signal to slow it down. And that's when your diet begins to resemble more like what it'll look like after the diet is over. Okay. This is off my Instagram, by the way. Follow me at FazLift on Instagram. So, 2 big mistakes and what you can learn from it. 1, don't be a perfectionist. Don't have rigid dieting values. Focus on what matters, which is a calorie deficit. How you structure that is entirely up to you. And flexibility in a diet is not choosing between white rice or brown rice, or not fitting things within your calories because your coach said, have whatever you like within your calories. No. Flexibility is you being able to comfortably go off plan, but also, like an adult, come back on plan when it's the next meal. And secondly, you need to be able to slow things down as it comes to the end of the diet, because you're thinking about the long term. You're not just thinking about getting to the end of the diet by any ways or means. All right. Hopefully that was useful, guys. If you would like to work with me on your own diets, then there is a link in the description, and I will speak to you next time. Take care.